Hey guys, Shaman King Arsu here again. This time, not a laddering video. I've been haven't figured out a team I really want to try on ladder. I've been mostly laddering on my main instead of my alt. So maybe I'll do an episode at some point just laddering on my alt or my main, excuse me. But taking a sip of nice water. Today, I got a two-part video. This is gonna be the first part. I'll be focusing on spikes, what I think about spikes offense, just general do's and don'ts, my opinion anyway, on spikes. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I'm not an expert. There are people that are way better at AVD than I am. This is just me, my ladder experience. I have a lot of games on ladder, so I can maybe tell you a lot on ladder. But other than that, I'm shaky. So the reason I want to talk about this, I think when someone joins AVD, one of the things you're going to notice immediately is that spikes is prevalent, powerful, but has opportunity costs. So I want to get into that. So let's talk about the history real quick of opportunity costs. Of like spikes, stealth rocks, talk spikes, etc. Just basically entry hazards, right? Gen 1 doesn't have any. Now, I've not played a lot of Gen 1, so I don't know, but generally speaking, yeah, there's just none. There's nothing there. Gen 2 introduced spikes. It's limited distribution. It's on just Fortress and Cloister. I think Smeargle can learn it too. I could be wrong on that. Those are the three. Those are your... Maybe there's like Alms or something. But Skarmory couldn't, and I'll get to that. Gen 4... introduces stealth rocks, toxic spikes, and 3-sec spikes that already existed in Gen 3. And at that point, stacking became extremely powerful. In Gen 1 doesn't exist. Gen 2 it's powerful, but Cloister's a really good mon. It's I think one of the top 5 GSC mons. So no doubt it's powerful, but spikes is one layer. In Gen 3, and one of the things I really like about Gen 3, is I think there's a particular balance there where entry hazards are strong, but they're not overpowered. I say that as if Skarmory isn't like one of the best and most infuriating monsters to deal with spikes. But there's a lot of counterplay. And critically, with spikes, there is opportunity cost. I think unlike Gen 4 gives everything stealth rocks, right? So any mon could just be carrying stealth rocks and put it up. And rapid spin is limited. Options, there's no defog in later gens. So spike stack, or stacking at least stealth rocks on the field, is really powerful. Stealth rocks does, it does less than 3 layers of spikes, but to like flying mons, like to mons that are normally accustomed to being immune to spikes, does a lot. Excuse me, I am very thirsty right now. Just got out of class and it's hot down here. So, stealth rocks is just, you can slap it on a team. You can have an offensive mon, like instead of a coverage move, you just slap stealth rocks. And it is your coverage move because it just chips everything. So, in AVD though, you have a limited amount of spikers and a limited amount of rapid spinners. We will get to rapid spinners. That's actually part 2. I want to focus on rapid spin in part 2. Right now, though, spikers, right? And I put up a list. Shout out to Rosalia. Not that I've ever used it, but I know people are experimenting with it. I don't know why I have this there. Anyway, there is a bigger list. Let me actually do this in particular. This might actually help better. It does not show Smeargle. But Smeargle would be on here. And here's some other mons that... Deoxys learns it too, but... Deoxys is kind of illegal. So, anyway. You have 8 Spiker mons in the entire AVD OU. At least originally. Cacturn is now banned because of Sandvale. Sandvale is obviously really overpowered, so Cacturn is gone. I don't know how much you used spikes when it was. Someone could probably tell me about that, but with that out of the way, you got 7. Okay. And Quillfish and Omastar don't really exist, and Rosalia didn't exist for a long time. I've been experimenting with Omastar recently. Not too much success so far, but I'm experimenting with it because high defense, high special attack, has spikes, you know. Anyway, so what do I need an opportunity cost though for spikers? Other than this is limited distribution. Well, if you look at the spikers in particular, they're all mons. Like at least let's just look at OU for a second. Cloister, Fortress, Skarmory. These mons are all weak to Magneton. All three of these are weak to Magneton. Now Glalie not. I don't think Glalie takes a rogue. Glalie is Suicide Spiker, and Smeargle, who's not on here, Suicide Spiker. So you really get two types of spikers. The spikers that want to stay long in the game, and the spikers that are going to kill themselves. Excuse my language there. Skarmory, Fortress want to stay longer in the game. The goal, they're laying down spikes for a long-term goal, and they're not just going to sack themselves. That's not what they're trying to do. But when Magneton is running around, potentially, then that's a problem. You can't do that easily. Skarm has it really bad because unless you're Yellow Skarm, once again, then you become a Suicide Spiker. You always lose to Magneton with Magnet, basically. I mean, you survive a little bit, but it's like usually Skarm is not leading. It might get chipped by something coming in, and then you get Magneton it, and then all of a sudden that chip might be what it needs Magneton to just guarantee a kill, especially with Magnet. So Skarmory has to invest in special defense and HP. Can invest in defense to maybe take physical moves better, which is part of the thing Skarmory, you want Skarmory to take physical moves too, but you can't extra invest because you have to defend against special attacks, mainly just not getting trapped by Magneton, being completely dead. Fortress has a slightly better, I say, because Fortress, I think, survives HP Fire because not stab from Magneton, usually, I believe, without any damage or residual. Oh, it's at least a range. I know I've seen it. I've had a few times where I've had modest Magneton hit Fortress with HP Fire and Fortress survive an Earthquake, and it's like, well, that's also Magneton. But the problem with Fortress is that it is extremely slow. It is weak to spikes itself, so it might take a hit, but now it is kind of out of the game. It's a 1-for-1. You maybe keep your spikes. Maybe they have Rapid Spin. Speaking of, if you're investing in all of these, you're investing time and effort to lay down at least a layer of spikes, but you probably want 3. I think the goal of all spikers is to get 3 layers of spike because 25% is a lot of damage. You either go for 1 or 3. Like 2 is, I mean, if you get 2, you get 2, whatever. It's not bad, but the jump between 1 to 2 is not very good. The jump between 2 and 3 is great. The jump from 0 to 1 is excellent, right? So you run into this issue where you really, really, really need to protect those spikes. So let me give an example right here. Skarmory. If you're running Skarmory, you're usually running a Ghost beside it. Now, Ghosts in Gen 3 are pretty limited. In Gen 4, I think Rotom comes out, and there's a few other Ghosts. In Gen 3, you really have... You have 6 fully evolved options. But I mean, you can eliminate Sableye. It's not very good, unfortunately. You can eliminate Shedinja. I mean, look at the BTS 230. I mean, 236. Yeah, I don't know why you even have special defense and defense. Why can't they just give it 1 defense? Just give better sets everywhere else. I don't know. But Wonder Guard's cool. I mean, you can. But I mean, this wall's Claydol, for example. Like Claydol, for example. But your Die to Sandstorm. Sorry. Shedinja's a cool mon in Ubers, potentially. I played a little Ubers. The one Uber team we're in, when I play Ubers, I like Shedinja because Kyogre counter, but then they run Pursuit, you know. So. No one is running Shedinja to be a spike blocker. You're running Shedinja as a win condition. So, Spike's a win condition. Shedinja is a win condition in itself. Not a good win condition, but it is a win condition. The idea of just getting rid of all the checks, all things that get hit, Bug, Ghost, and then running to town with Shedinja. All right. Mischievous, Bayonet, Dusclops, Gengar. You don't really see Bayonet. I've tried Bayonet before, not very good. Mischievous you see sometimes because it's kind of a counterpart to Gengar, but it's not weak to Psychic. And it still has decent defenses. Its bulk-wise is slightly bulkier than Gengar. And if you're running defensive Gar, I mean, this can't learn Willow, I don't think. So that's kind of one of the reasons Gengar Willow is really strong. And then Dusclops is the ultimate spin blocker, but it offers no offensive pressure. Keep in mind with spikes, it's not very useful if you can't force switches. And the two ways to force switches is offensive pressure, clicking roar / whirlwind. If you can't do either of those things, you can't really force switches. Now, offensive pressure can be toxic. Dusclops can click toxic or Willow. So that offers some offensive pressure. But like sub 10 400 HP, 404 HP mons, for example, like Calm Mind, Jirachi, Max HP. I'm trying that right now. Thanks, Babakuno. What Dusclops doesn't really do anything to those. They set up, they sweep, right? So this means if you're running spin block, or you're running spinners, or excuse me, if you're running spikers, you're running a spin blocker. Now you might say, just don't run spin block. Don't. Okay. If you're building a team around spikes to chip things, and you lose spikes, you have lost a major win con. I'm not saying you lose the game instantly. But if you're running spikes, the goal is for spikes to chip things that normally you couldn't defeat without spikes. That's my thinking on it. Spikes is supposed to help you chip stuff or force people to move around so threats that normally couldn't break through can now break through. For example, I think of Swampert, right? Swampert can be really tough to break through. Or Blissey. Swampert and Blissey, for example, can be really tough to break through. But they take spikes chip. And Blissey doesn't heal in sand, right? Swampert obviously heals, but that means they can't come in. So eventually for Swampert, for example, maybe now it's in range of a +1 Mence or a +1 Tar of Earthquake, or HP Flying in Mence's case. And now you're able to break through, and maybe that was the linchpin holding you back from sweeping. Spikes is helping you break through stuff. So in that investment, you need to protect spikes. In most cases, it's going to be Gengar. And in most cases, that's going to be defensive Gengar. As opposed to here. Right? Not a bad set. I'm not going to disparage defensive Gengar. I don't like defensive Gengar. I like offensive Gengar. I'll leave it at that. I don't really like the passivity. I'm going to say passivity. That's the wrong word. It's not passive. This is definitely not passive. But Willow, 75% accuracy really sucks. Taunt takes some skill because you got to read this up. It's really good against Blissey. This is great. I think this is great into like Blissey. Like Blissey comes in, tries to softball, you taunt it. Now it can't. Then you hit it. You hit it with some other moves, right? And this helps you against Gyarados and Salamence, who are not weak to spikes. So this is a really good partner with defensive spike-oriented play. Not stall, right? So defensive, there is that difference between defense versus stall. Defensive, I think, usually has some offensive pressure. Defensive pressure is basically Roar, Toxic, Willows, except, more of not allowing Mons to be a long-term threat as opposed to damaging Mons into killing them, basically. Anyway. So, when you're running this stuff, and this is for typical spikes, if you're running a more balanced or defensive team, spin block becomes important. And that means you have to beat spinners. Now, luckily, Gengar beats most of the spinners for you. It does very good into a lot of spinners. And I'll just grab it really quick. I feel like it's important to at least talk about this. Not that anyone, there's a few monsters who do that, but in particular, Rapid Spin. These 6 right here, 4 of these just straight up lose to Gengar. Fortress has to be Spirit of Fire Punch, or it could just be taunted, or it can't really do much. Cloister, Thunderbolt, of Armaldo and Donphan Will-O-Wisp, because these break it through physical moves. Claydol also doesn't want to get burned, because part of it is defending its Tyranitar, but it does have Psychic. Starmie is kind of the only one I feel like is a good answer, because especially offensive Starmie can potentially threaten with Hydros or Psychics, and has Rapid Spin, and is very fast. So Gengar has to kind of pick the tempo up, and it could be, it could take serious damage from Starmie. And consort with other chip, it'll break through, right? But you can't rely on just Gengar, right, blocking the one. Because keep in mind, Gengar's role is to spin block, but it does other stuff on the team. So you need, in my opinion, then the third slot, you need, well, first of all, I would say, with this sort of team, you want Sand so they can't recover your Spikes chip, right? Like, so, if that's the case, you want a Spiker plus Gengar plus Tyranitar. I'm not saying that's mandatory, because you could just hope your opponent brings Sand. But I feel like you also don't want to risk them not bringing Sand, right? You don't want to go in the game like, oh, I'm going to drop Spikes, and then they can heal through it because there's no Sand, they can protect or rest, or Spikes and Sand keeps people honest. So these three kind of together, and then you want a Mon that beats beats Rapid Spin Mons. Maybe we'll use Swampert as an example. Swampert is a pretty good matchup in most of these. It beats Armaldo, beats Donphan. It does okay into Starmie. Beats Claydol with Hydro Pump. Cloister and Fortress, it does okay against, right? Could chip them. Or another example, I would say Firemon, like Charizard, does really good into a lot of Rapid Spin Mons. They cannot, like, basically all of them except Armaldo. Really, even Armaldo is going to take a lot of fire moves. So if you chip it with the Spikes come in, a few times, you block the first one, and then you're able to get it the second time, maybe that's going to be enough. Charizard, for example, right here, it could be really helpful for that. Beats a lot of those, except Starmie. Once again, Starmie is a big threat, but doesn't beat Starmie. But it beats the others, for example. So I feel like you want to have something backing up your Rapid Spin Mon. Now, this is not when we're talking about suicide spikers. Smeargle being the key example, where Smeargle leads, gets Spikes up, and then you go from there. Now, you usually still want to run Gengar because you want to protect your investment, right? Because you've given up a Mon. Like, you are going 5. With Smeargle, you go down 5-6. If you play it right, you go down 5-5. Potentially 4-6 or 4-5 if you really play well with Spore, keeping something asleep. But you also could run into a Zapdos and it obliterates you, and you're like, you're kind of fucked to give you, basically any word to use. You kind of just are like, what do you do if they lead something like that? Now, Zapdos is a pretty common lead. It's not the only lead. But point is, in that case, you might get one layer if you're lucky. And typically, if they have sub, you're really, really not good, because then it's like, ugh. So anyway, Smeargle faces that issue. So you really want Gar, and this is not the disparaged Gengar video, but that's a lot. You're putting a lot in investment into a few Mons, right? You have to have the Spiker, and that Spiker needs Spin Block. You have to protect your investment. And that means you need to play around not losing your Spin Blocker. And your Spiker you don't want to lose either, because what if you do get spun? You do want to be able to put the Spikes back up or get 3 layers. You don't want to necessarily just give up Skarmory or any other Spiker. So, in general, right, you are putting a lot of investment here. Now, there's a lot of Mons that need a lot of investment. There's a lot of good Mons that need investment. I mean, I'll use Blissey, for example. Blissey needs sturdy physical walls next to it to do its job. because it can take a stray physical hit, but Rock Slide, like if it takes a stray physical hit and that because like a T-Tar with Rock Slide and it flinches you, you're not taking 3. So you need like a Swampert, for example, next to in a Skarmory, usually, right? To take those hits that you really don't appreciate with Blissey. Oh, I'm tired, right? So there's a lot of mods that need partners. Pokemon is not a one game. There's not a mon that just supports itself indefinitely. It does not need support. Even the best mons appreciate having backup next time. There's very few mons in history that are just like so overpowered that the team composition doesn't matter too much. Oh, you have Gen 2 Snorlax. Not to say the team doesn't matter. It does. But Gen 2 Snorlax is so good, it doesn't need support. You just run it. There's no reason not to run Snorlax. It's just that good. You don't have to be like, oh, well, if I run Snorlax, there's an opportunity cost. No, there's no opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is not running Snorlax. Like, why the heck are you not? And usually the answer is you just not running it because you don't want to run it. So, what do you do then if you're running spikes? I think for me anyway, spikes is something that you need to have pressure, okay? So you need to build your team, and as I said, I would build with Tar in mind, right? These are kind of 3, and I'm not saying you have to run. Once again, you could let your opponent bring, like, and you could run maybe Dusclops instead here, if you're running a more stall team, but at that point you probably drop Tar, because Tar is not, I don't think Tar is great on stall because it has a lot of weaknesses. Stall mons are very bulky. There's no mons that are just so bulky they get away with immune resistance, except fucking Blissey. Fuck Blissey. Basically gets away with that on any side, right? Like a special defensive mon can be overwhelmed eventually if it doesn't take care of those. Like, Calm Mind, Rain Dance, Rest Suicune can beat Blissey because it sets up on Blissey's face and slowly powers itself up to defeat Blissey, right? And can rest, and it can heal and sub, and etc. Not very common, but the point is that no mons are immovable, so you don't want to have more weakness. Anyway, I'm getting on tangent to stall, which I don't really know stall enough to really. I run offense. A lot of these are obviously guided by offense, so I feel like these are kind of a core. Your spiker, which you can have other spikers. So let's go back to other spikers because I've gotten a little off track. Well, let's talk about all the spikers really quick. Let me actually go all the way back. Here we go. These are the main 6. I say main 6 because Rosalia doesn't really count, and Glalie kind of on the edge there, but let's talk about it. So Skarmory is obviously the typical spiker. Like, you're running Skarmory almost every single time. I don't think there's too many reasons to run anything else over Skarmory, but you are very weak to Magneton. There's not much you could do there, and that's where the appeal of other spikers come in. Because Skarmory can run suicide lead spikes, and it can run it to be Magneton. Like, I think yellow Skarm, right? Which I think is no, it's not timid. It's you need the max attack investment, right? Because you suck. I think it's like spikes, HP ground, drill. I don't know the last move. Roar maybe, I guess. I don't know. I don't know the slots. I'm gonna keep it empty. But this is kind of your YOLO set, but you could just lose to timid Magneton. Not that timid Magneton is exceptionally common, but you have to watch out for that. I think it hits and also now your opportunity cost is you're running a mon that sets up spikes and can take a physical hit, but could not take special hit for shit. And that's the opportunity cost of, I think opportunity costs a lot, of suicide spikers, right? Because you're basically running mons that get up spikes, and that's it. So you're running 5, that means your team options become very limited. You're running offense, you're not running defense. you're even running balance, you have to run offense or hyper offense, and just use spikes to overwhelm your opponent. Get them on the back foot, break some checks open they normally couldn't break open, and you might not even get multiple layers. Taunt's the last move. Right. Taunt's I was forgetting. Taunt because you beat other Skarms now. So, I mean, you can run this, but usually you run defensive, which is like Spikes, Protect, Drill, or HP Flying, Whirlwind, Roar. Sometimes you run Toxic. But there's a lot that goes into this. So, Skarmory is the most common. The two other OU spikers are Fortress and Cloister. Now, if you asked me this 2 months ago, I would say these are both bad mons. Borderline OU level. But when you play the two more, I've been playing for a long time, but you also learn a lot more as you get higher on ladder, and especially when you talk to more people. I don't necessarily think these are bad mons, but I think they are inferior to Skarmory. There's a reason that Skarmory is used way more than these guys. Fortress, obviously, is weak to Spikes itself. So now you want Rapid Spin, but you can't really run Spikes plus Rapid Spin because then you lose other coverage because you want Explosion. And then you have HP Ghost or Bug or Earthquake or, there's a lot. So you have to run Spikes or Rapid Spin. I think usually it's Spikes. I could be wrong on that, someone can correct me, but generally speaking, Fortress is almost always just a complete support mon, and it also really doesn't do much other than spiking. See, Skarmory, the reason, and I'll give the praise for Skarmory here that I don't like giving, the thing about Skarmory is it's never passive. Okay, I know that's weird because it's a defensive mon, but it has Roar, it has Toxic, I could potentially run, it could have Drill, and Drill could be threatening to Celebi, for example, and maybe likes coming thinking it's safe. It's never passive, okay? Whereas I think Fortress right here is kind of always stuck to some passivity other than booming. It has to blow up, and then it's gone, and now if you get your spikes spun, it's a problem. Now, you don't have to run Explosion, but I mean, I guess you could run. It's got 90 attacks, so I wonder. Maybe one day we'll see a freaking real meat and potatoes, and you get that choice band, right? Now I'm like sitting here like, ooh, kind of interesting. Hidden Power Ghost. Maybe this will be the next video. Maybe I'll have to make the next video on this. We'll see. HP. What other move could I run right here? Oh, you can run Rock. Oh, it has Rock Slide. Holy, too slow though. I mean, you can go like 140. Okay. So using this as an example, you're never gonna see this. No one's running Choice Band Fortress with spikes. That's absolutely ridiculous. Until I do it. But in all seriousness, you're not going to see this. It's going to be spikes, explosion, and two other moves. And that's a problem. You're not necessarily getting a lot there, I think. So in many ways, Fortress, other than booming, and you don't want to boom and get rid of your spike mon. That's why I like Skarmory, because Skarmory, even though it's defensive in nature, it can roar and then move. It can move things around. It can shuffle the board, as we'll say, and they might go into something that cannot even touch you, and then they're like, "Oh no!" I'm gonna have to. I don't know. 90 attacks, low-key, not even. I mean, it's not great, but with Choice Band, you could do this as like a gimmicky set. Maybe not Choice Band, though, because the problem with Choice Band is then you just lock into one move. But anyway, point is, investment's cool. Cloister. Okay. Cloister, I used to think was not great. Now I think it's decent on Jolt Spikes. I like it over Skarmory because I like the speed with Surf. Spikes, and you can run Rapid Spin or Ice Beam. I run Rapid Spin because I like the idea of emergency Rapid Spinning. And then I'll talk about this in the Rapid Spin video. Maybe I'll even talk about this video. Maybe I'll just make them both. Maybe as I'm talking, we'll see how I feel when I get done with Spikes. But Rapid Spin is a huge opportunity cost, even in comparison to Spike. Spike's opportunity cost, Rapid Spin's a massive opportunity cost. So this is nice. A Fortress can run Rapid Spin plus Spikes too, but it's slower. So I'm not sure how good that is. Where I think with Cloister, it might get more opportunities because it'll get less chip because it's faster, so it can spin on different things. But Ice Beam's also really good because Stab Ice, can be pretty devastating. It can hit things kind of hard. Sometimes we forget that Ice is not resisted by a lot of things except Metagross, which is a really good mon for one of those. That's one of the many reasons. Nice, but typical. It's basically this one spread right here. This sometimes will be Ice Beam. I've seen HP Grass for Swampert. And you can run more speed, but once again, you're not going to get that much faster. 70 is enough to outrun a lot of things you want to outrun. You want special hits because look at this special hits. 45. Yikes. You do not take a special hit without investment for shit. So, you're kind of pigeonholed a little bit set-wise. Yeah, just a little bit. Not fully, but you're kind of like, okay, I got to run this sort of not suicide fully, but you usually get up spikes and then you blow up on something. Can be fine, but there's opportunity cost there. You have lost a Mon, and you need to hope that the other 5 Mons you have are going to pressure their team, or you click Explosion and really nail something, right? This is kind of the same thing with Smeargle and Glalie. Same archetypes, but they have a few differences. Smeargle is faster because you're usually like timid. You're 273. And I think Glalie faster, but this has Spore plus Spikes. So you can Spore, if they're a bad lead matchup, you can always Spore and then get 1 layer of Spikes guaranteed. A lot of Spikers, sometimes you don't get layers of Spikes up because, like, for example, Skarmory comes in, but they switch in Charizard. And then you're like, oh, I have to switch, and maybe you switch into something, and then you have to do that song and dance and get it back in. And maybe they read you, maybe they don't let you get Skarm back in without taking huge damage or sacking something, etc., which could be a problem. So it's not always easy, but Smeargle, since it leads, if it gets a good lead matchup, if it's not running into, like, Zapdos in particular, or a Lom Mom, which is kind of one of the advents of stuff with Jinx, when Jinx got really popular, and I imagine Lum was there before Smeargle, before Baton Pass was banned and unbanned now. Sorry, that was really confusing, but basically, Smeargle is going to Spore, is going to set 3 layers of Spikes, and is going to Explosion or Destiny Bond. I say those are slots. Sometimes you'll see, like, I've seen Transform or, like, Dragon Dance Baton Pass, or I've tried Tail Glow Baton Pass, which I think is cool. But there's not enough special attacking. There's not enough Mons that, because of Blissey, there's not enough Mons that just, like, blast through special attack. So, Suicide, and this is the same thing in Glalie. Glalie, though, has a good matchup into Zapdos because Ice Beam is very dangerous. It can't be flinched. I think people invest it so it can survive Rock Slide, so it can always beat, like, a Mets or something, for example. I'm not sure how much, 100% how it is, but Glalie is a mon I've not tried, so I don't have too much of an opinion. I've tried Smeargle, Skarmory, Cloister, and I've tried a very, very little Fortress. I have to re-examine Fortress before I can really sit here. But I've seen Glalie on ladder, and it's respectable. I definitely don't think it's a bad mon. It's definitely not a gimmick, right? Like, it's definitely not like someone's running it just because they want to run Glalie. It has its uses. It can always, relatively speaking, unless in the Tar or Metagross lead matchup, it can get 1 layer of Spikes up, but that's not all that great. So that's where it's not great. Like, it's great into Zapdos. Like, Smeargle is great into everything but Zapdos, really, between the trio, right? Metagross usually ban lead. Smeargle beats that with Spore. Tyranitar can be an assortment. Unless it's Lum, it loses to Smeargle. Glalie is the opposite one where it beats Zapdos but loses to Metagross and most, if not all, T-Tar sets. I mean, some T-Tar sets like Fire Blast. I think you can live Fire Blast. But then you spike Ice Beam, I guess. So those are the kind of the two suicide, or these suicide, they lead, they get spikes up, and then you offensive pressure. Usually Gengar is in the back, so if the game does slow down, you can protect yourself. And finally, Rosalia. I know people have been trying it. I think I've seen it once or twice on ladder. I don't get it, but I think I have to put it in there because I think people have gotten to 1700 with Rosalia. And I think that more shows the power of spikes less than the power of Rosalia. My opinion. Anyway, but it has a decent Zapdos non-HP Ice non-Drill matchup. Decent special defense, good special attack, so it can do some offensive pressuring. But overall, I don't see too much of the appeal. Also, it is a spiker that is weak to, say it with me now, spikes. And that's why Skarmory is kind of Skarmory is the best one because it's not weak to spikes. It always exhibits offensive pressure, but therefore, Magneton exists, and Skarmory gets countered by Magneton, and then you don't get the spikes up. So, basically with spikes, you're running into an investment problem. So much has to be given to the team. Now, this is not to say you shouldn't run spikes. All right. I'm not saying this to say spikes is bad. I think that's foolish to say because spikes is really good. But if you just run a spiker plus Gengar or like a spin blocker or whatever type, does not necessarily make it like, oh my god, my team's amazing. I have the perfect combination. No, like there's a lot of weaknesses here and there's an opportunity cost. Those slots could be two like powerhouses. You might be giving up, let's just say maybe Metagross Salamence. I'm not saying you can't have Metagross Salamence on the back of that team. You might have some other mons because you need to hit some other things. Like you need a Rock Resist, so you need Swampert, or Metagross. That's where you could be if you're Metagross. You probably want a Special Wall, so you want to hit Blissey. I mean, that's what they're right there. Swampert plus Blissey. TSS, right? And then +1. TSS is kind of the standard. Toxic, Sandstorm, Spikes. Usually that is going to be Skarm, Swampert, Blissey, Gengar, Tyranitar, and 6. We can get into a whole TSS video. I don't know enough about TSS, so it would be someone else's video. But suffice to say, that is one style where Spikes is proven to be extremely effective. TSS is able to pressure offensively while having great defensive integrity. While I do hate Blissey and I do not like TSS because I think it is too slow and passive for my particular tastes, the reason TSS works is the balance between Skarm and Blissey. The Spikes chipping, Blissey able to take such devastating hits, or Swampert being able to take physical devastating hits, and forcing your foes to switch around and slowly get chipped down into range of your attackers, particularly Gengar, or your 6-mon, usually of Zapdos or Starmie. That's what I think off the top of my head. That will finish off your opponent once they have exhausted their resources and their ways to get around your team. So, Spikes makes up the best style. Spikes is ever present. And running Spikes is good. But you don't have to run Spikes. I think, in fact, you need to run a team that exerts offensive pressure on someone. I think for a lot of defensive teams, the easiest way to exert offensive pressure is through Spikes. Because Spikes always does damage. It always moves things. Spikes plus Roar/Whirlwind is really powerful because your opponent cannot set up because they get roared out. They can't stay in because they get roared out. They can't maybe like protect stall because eventually they gotta stop protecting. And they can't just hope, oh well, eventually they run out because usually your team will get chipped enough from Spikes. You want to switch, you don't want it, and it can run Toxic, for example, too. That's why Toxic Rain's coming because, well, maybe someone's thinking I can stay in or the last one you Toxic it. It's like, I'm a timer now. A lot of times that happens. Like many times I've gambled on, prayed that Skarmory did not carry Toxic to try to set up like a DD Ment and get punched with Toxic. Many, many times. The point, though, is that Spikes has an investment cost. If you just run a Spiker, I don't necessarily think that's really that good. You need a backbone to make sure Spikes stay up for a long term and actually chip. Because think about it this way. If your Spikes do less than 100% damage a game, or contribute to multiple kills in some way, have you really done anything with Spikes? Now, I know Stealth Rocks can take a Pokemon in half in some games, but what I mean is that if you get a layer of Spikes up, and your Skarmory dies, let's say, Spikes becomes worth it because you've given up one full Mon for one layer. Let's say you only get one layer, you die instantly, you get crit. Right? Usually you can get two, or you protect, or do something else, right? But let's say you only get one. That means you need a Mon you need 8 switches to make up the equivalent damage at Skarmory HP at base even. And that isn't even counting leftovers. Like a Swampert comes in on one layer of Spikes and only takes 6% basically. Think about it like that. Like, you need to protect that investment. Even if it's one now, 3 layers you only need to do it 4 times, and you usually get more. But that's the thing. That's what makes Spike's teams good. The ability to force Mons to switch around to to chip. You want to make a ton of switches, and maybe eventually they spin it. But if they have to take 15, 20 pricks of damage from Spikes to do it, you've won the game already. You've chipped their team extremely. You've probably killed a few Mons. And that's why a lot of times there's like a lot of teams like having 2 or 3 floaters. Like Gengar, Zapdos, Flygon, etc. Because then Spikes becomes less effective because you can float over it. And we'll talk about a lot of this on the my Rapid Spin video I want to do, which is basically how to counter Spikes, right? Because I think once you understand what it takes to keep Spikes up and what it does, then I think we can go to that. We can talk about, okay, so this is what Spikes does and how to keep it up. How do I beat it? Because while I'm talking about how Spikes is not particularly amazing sometimes, it's still the best. Skarmory is still one of the best Mons because it has Spikes. Spikes, Tyranitar Sand is very important, but Tyranitar Sand is usually backed up with Spikes. Offensive pressure like that. Everything takes damage. Everything is not healing. Some things are taking ludicrous amounts of damage trying to come in. Trying to just switch in. And there is that balance there. There is a particular and poignant balance there with Spike's offense. Or Spike's just in general. You want to exert offensive pressure. You want to have things to take off. Oh, speaking of on a Spike team, I guess we mentioned you need to be able to take off flyers. Now, Tyranitar does that with Rock Slide, for example, but not all flyers. Flygon, for example, needs Ice Move. So that's another thing to keep in mind. You do need to have answers for things. Like, I think I ran into a team I've run into a few teams on the ladder where I've run Spike teams and they run 5 floaters, 6 floaters. Usually that's a little extreme, but you can see games with 3 floaters. Like let me think of a team example. Maybe like you're running Skarmory, Zapdos, Gengar on TSS. That's 3 floaters. So half your investment on Spikes, half the mods you're trying to hit can't be hit. Now, you still hit the other half. So it's not useless. It's not as if your opponent brings 3 floaters, it's useless. But once again, opportunity cost. You're bringing something that in some games is going to have far less impact, especially if you're suicide lead Spikes. Once again, not to keep heaping praise on the Skarmory. I think one of the reasons the Skarmory is good is because it's not a suicide spiker. It's flexible. So if your opponent is running a team that does not have a ton of spike weakness, at least you didn't bring them on that is useless. Or not useless, but not very long-term has any use outside of maybe exploding and spiking. You know? So, I think I've kind of hit all the points. I am pretty tired from school. So, I think next time I'm going to talk about Rapid Spin. I hope everyone has enjoyed this video. I know it's a lot shorter than a lot of the other videos I've done. I know that I have not done YouTube in a bit. I've been busy, but I'm hopefully going to be trying to do YouTube consistently every few days. I think I was on a streak for a while. Now I'm hoping to do it maybe every 3 or 4 days, get something out at least. But anyway, I want to thank everyone for watching, and peace out.